Hello, wonderful MESA community. My name is Janae and I am the MESA Director at Spokane Falls Community College. And today I would like to talk to you about study skills. The reason I wanted to put on this workshop is a lot of students have asked, how did you get through college? How do I get through college? How do I succeed in the classes that I want to succeed in? And so I'm just doing this workshop based on my personal experiences as a biology major through an undergraduate and master's program, earning my teaching certification in the state of Washington, and also being a teacher for a number of years in a variety of projects. So I really hope that you take this workshop as just some advice. And I know it's not really the news that you want to hear, but everybody learns differently. And so take what works for me and then see what works for you. Do a little bit of trial and error, leave yourself some time for practice and patience, and we'll find out what works best for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you our PowerPoint for our MESA workshop on STEM study skills. So, how do I study for STEM? STEM's a little bit different than foreign languages or math, or excuse me, foreign languages or English. It takes a lot of active learning, and I'm a really big proponent on doing something with your brain, your hands, your voice, your eyes, whatever it may be, not just sitting passively and letting the instructor, the teacher, the textbook give you the information, and rather being active with your learning. So that's what we're going to learn about today. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to give you some time. I really want you to participate in this activity. So I'm going to sit here for a solid minute, and I know we're on video, but I want you to pull out a piece of paper, a pen, a pencil, and think about this. You personally think about, how do you study? What do you do before class, during, after exam, before an exam? So sit here and think about these different bullet points. Go ahead and write down some ideas. Okay, you can go ahead and pause the video if you need some more time to write. I only waited about 60 seconds, but you can go ahead and pause the video if you need more time to answer these questions for yourself, and I really recommend doing that. You can't learn if you don't have any prior knowledge inside your brain, and having the connections based on what you do will help you make connections in this workshop, this lecture, based on what I do, helping you with that. So on my personal note, when I was in school, how did I study? What did I do before class, during, after, all that stuff. So I would start every term, every quarter or semester with looking at my syllabus, my syllabi, and seeing what important dates are needed to know. I would look at course objectives if they were given, and also what were the subjects prior reading expected by the instructor. And so I would also look, we live in a really nice time in our technology. We live in a time when instructors are putting a lot of information online. We get that information before. So instructors are providing their PowerPoints online, their notes, and a bunch of videos online. So I would pull off instructor PowerPoints before the exam, before each lecture, and I would hand write out every bullet point of PowerPoint. So I'd take the PowerPoint, I'd pull out my notebook, and I would hand write all the PowerPoints, leaving spaces in between each bullet point. So then when I went to a lecture, I didn't have to worry so much about what was up on the PowerPoint, because I knew I had those words in front of me. I had a resource to get those words. Then I could then focus on what the instructor was talking about. So I would use lecture to fill in those blanks, kind of make a mess of my notes and add whatever is needed into those handwritten bullet points. And then within 24 hours of a lecture, I would go back, I would take a new notebook, and I would rewrite out my lecture notes. Rewrite it out, make it nice. To me, the act of repetition, the act of writing is something that helps me learn. Putting notes in context that makes sense for me. Now, some people are verbal presenters, and so they will talk out their notes and just share and talk out, or talk to a person. That can help you learn. It's helpful to form study groups and to use interactive interfaces such as Google Documents, or like a live editing document where students can take notes during class, and you can see whether students are filling in, and if you missed one component or one point, you can use the information to the other students had and fill in the blanks. A lot of people will take their notes, and at the end of every week, write out practice exams of their own notes. And so there is no harm in creating your own practice exams from your own notes and taking a guess, a Ganter on what's important from this material, what was the instructor really emphasizing, what might seem important, and creating your own practice exams can help you think through the material in a different way than rather just passively regurgitating bullet points. And you can also share exams with classmates, and so you can help each other study. So there's some ideas that I helped with lectures, and then before and after exams, I would sit and write practice exams with my own notes, and I would share with peers and quiz each other. Note cards, repetition, repetition, repetition. A lot of students will use a half sheet note type taking, and they'll use half the sheet where they take the notes, and then they'll fold the sheet and try to rewrite the notes out. That's really helpful for any class where you need to memorize processes or problems or formulas. That's a really helpful way. But I really, really emphasize repetition and active learning, not just sitting passively getting the information. I can't emphasize that active learning enough. Whether you need to draw diagrams or buy a giant whiteboard and have it at home and rewrite out the concepts you're stuck on, or bring in a group and rewrite out concepts you're stuck on, or rewrite out facts but leave blanks, leave the key words and definition blank, and have a friend or a peer fill in the blanks. Just try to actively engage with your material rather than showing up to class, not even have any idea of what the objective is, just passively sitting in class, no note taking, and then going home and trying to relearn it. I also recommend to students asking their instructors if they can videotape or voice record lectures. That's also a helpful way, so you don't feel so rushed during class. You have a way to have the information at home, and so you can, again, repeat, repeat, repeat. That's personally what I did. So go ahead and think about, what am I doing? What's working? What's not working? What is working for other classmates? And you can always ask other friends, other classmates. It's really trial and error, and try to give yourself patience, but you will find something that works, and I really recommend doing it now rather than later. If you don't have time to do it right, when are you going to have time to do it at all? And then the last bullet point, what is the difference between learning and studying? A lot of people think they're the same. They think, oh, I read the book for 6 hours, I learned it, I must be good. But what were you doing while you were reading the book? The act of reading the book could be studying. But if you're just passively reading the book, blindly highlighting keywords and not really doing much with that highlighting, that's just studying. What's really important, especially as you get through college and on to upper division classes, we need to start learning. So take your textbook, and they always say read a passage 3 times. Start, read just the titles, bold words, headers, anything that's like really important. Close it and try to summarize, what am I going to learn? Then open it again and then read the passage. Close the book and try to write out again, or speak out, act out, whatever works for your learning techniques. What was the author trying to make in this passage? And then go back and open the book and then reread for any things that are confusing or any words you don't recognize. Again, repetition, repetition. You can study for hours and hours and hours, but you may not learn something. So try to think of your time as effective. It does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of effort and a lot of focus. And that's why we recommend start studying the immediate that class starts. Start studying way before each exam. That's when learning occurs. So go ahead and write down, what am I doing? What am I personally doing? And then try to critique it, see what's happening, and feel free to ask instructors. Instructors have been through the same classes you have, and now they're presenting in front of you, presenting the material. So ask them, what do you recommend for this class? How did you get through this material? Yeah, we're in this as a team. All of us have gone through, all of us that have degrees have gone through these classes. So don't feel afraid to ask out. This is where we talk about the act of learning. So we talked about studying is the act, and then learning is the more physiological component that's happening inside your brain. Yay, the brain is a really important thing. Neurobiology is one of my favorite topics, and it's fascinating to me that we are really just a mess of neurons and water. And that's what makes all of our emotions, that's what makes our actions, and that's what makes learning happen. So inside our brain, we have these really elongated cells called neurons. And our neurons can change. And how we learn is neurons physically change shape, they change chemistry, they change how effective they are at releasing those electrical signals. They realize they make more connections, they elongate. It's really amazing how different brain and how plastic or how versatile our brain neurons are. So the first time you learn something, nothing happens in the brain. So the first time you hear a foreign language, such as the words I have up here, we have Polish in the first sentence, and then the Indonesian language in the second line, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce these words, but to us, to those of us who don't speak Polish or don't speak Indonesian, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We don't have those neuron pathways yet. So the first time you see something, nothing happens. But then as you repeat, your brain sees the emphasis and the importance of understanding those components. We start making a neural circuit, which is a physical change among our neurons, more electricity, more neurotransmitters being passed from neuron to neuron, and that's what causes learning. When we were all born, we didn't know how to walk, we didn't know how to talk. We had to learn through different processes on how to walk, how to drive, how to read and write, and all of that is just altering our brain. We physically changed our brain through all those processes. It's just crazy how our brain just takes over and without us really realizing it, makes these circuit loops. And things that are really, really important or have lots of emotion tied to them are stronger neural circuits. So it's kind of like to use these examples. The first line, again, is Polish, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it. But if you want to loosely translate it, it's translated into not my circus, not my monkeys, which again, even in English, doesn't have a lot of literal sense. What are you talking about? Not my circus, not my monkeys. It's an idiom or a play on words, I guess you would say, and literally doesn't have a lot of sense. But what it's trying to say is not my problem, you know, not my problem. So not my circus, not my monkeys, really means not my problem. I shouldn't have to do anything about it. But if you don't have any back context, if you don't know what those letters mean put together, if you don't know what sound they make, it's not going to make any sense. So if you go into a chemistry lecture and you haven't looked at the book yet, you haven't read your syllabus, you haven't looked at the PowerPoints online if your instructor provides those, if you have no prior knowledge of what you should be getting into that lecture, you kind of have a wasted hour and a half. You can't start learning, you can't start using that lecture time to build on prior knowledge. You're just going to go in flat blank. Your brain chemistry is not going to have connections to make, and it's kind of a lost hour and a half. I always recommend that you go in at least understanding what topic the teacher is going to be talking about, maybe going in with having read the material and some questions you have, because that'll be your first introduction. And then you can use that lecture time as learning time rather than a wasted hour and a half. A lot of students will sit there and lecture like, oh my goodness, an hour to go, 45 minutes to go, and they don't even recognize that they should be using, you get a whole free hour and a half of study time. Of learning time while the instructor is there. So use that time to making those connections within your brain, rewiring, recircuiting those brain circuits. During lecture, every time you're in lab, every time you open the book, every time you open your notebook. The second line, again, is from Indonesia, and Sorry, I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I don't speak that language. But it loosely translates, oh my goodness, I just forgot what it loosely translates to, but we'll get back to that one. But again, to me, I don't speak that language, and so it makes no sense to me. Those connections of letters make no sense to me. Oh, I just remembered it. So it's when you dive, drink water. That's what it loosely translates to. When you dive, drink water. Again, even in English, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What they're trying to say is try to kill two birds with one stone is another idiom. Try to get more done at one time while you're there. So while you're completing the task, try to get more done at one time. So by itself doesn't have a lot of connections to us in our brain, but as you build on it and you're like, oh yeah, I have been in situations where I've tried to get more done than once. So building those brain connections and using every time that's in class, outside class as further learning and more active learning, I really, really recommend those, and those will get you far. This is a game changer for all educators. This is a really big component for those who go through education school, as I call it, and how our brain works. So I'm going to throw up a bunch of brain rules. When we do the workshop in person, I have students read out each number, and we think about, wow, my brain really does this. Wow, my brain will help us. When I do these things, they really help us understand. So sorry for the big words. Again, this is not the best example of an effective and best learning PowerPoint, but then you can learn, wow, there's a lot of words up here, no sense. But we're going to go through each one. So rule number one, exercise. Exercise, exercise boosts brain power. If you think about it, when you get tired, if you grab a cup of coffee or some caffeine, that's great, but it only really helps you for an hour, a half hour. Really getting oxygen to your brain and making your blood flow, that can help regurgitate those neural circuits, repolarize our neurons, recreate that neuron and electrical signal between our neurons. So if you're feeling sluggish, if you are reading the same passage in a book over and over again, go ahead and just go for a walk, go for a run, just get up and sit up and stretch, then get back to your books. Try not to drag yourself through your study period. Rule number two, the human brain evolves too. And that's what we talked about, that neuroplasticity. Humans are really apt at solving problems, learning from mistake, and creating alliances with other people. And that is what our brain knows helps us survive. And that comes from our heritage and our background, and anything that can help us collaborate, make connections. So talk to the people in your class, see what they're understanding. You probably understand something that they don't, and vice versa. So cooperate with yourself and understand that your brain, every little connection you're making, every little note you take, every action you make on those new information has a better chance of you learning it rather than you just studying it. Rule number three, every brain is wired differently. And that's why I've been saying write things out, talk things out, dance things out. I personally learn best by writing, but everyone is a different learner. Some people are best talking verbally. Auditory is through listening. Kinesthetic is through action, so they act things out. Written learning, it really just depends, and you have to find your own strengths and weaknesses. Every brain is wired differently. Rule number four, we don't pay attention to boring things. So think about your breakfast this morning. If nothing crazy happened, do you remember what you had for breakfast? However, think about the last time you were super, super happy. You probably remember everything that happened. Really emotional things, we tend to remember more. Our brain tends to make those neural circuits more when something is really emotional, whether those are good emotions or bad emotions. But if you are studying and you're studying with cookies, let's say, and that makes you really happy, potentially you could learn that environment better. But a lot of effective presenters try to make you laugh, try to make you feel, try to make you cry, and then you'll remember the information better. So try to make connections with the components. So if you're in your math class and you're really not understanding a theorem or a problem set, try to just at least make a connection, whether it's, oh, this theorem happens when I'm driving a car, or this theorem happens when you go cliff diving, or whatever it may be. Trying to add connections, emotions to components. And YouTube, the internet is full of really helpful free videos of all the basic math and science components, and they try to do it in a fun, upbeat voice, add some humor to it, and that helps with the emotional component. Number 5, repeat to remember. I've talked about this, repetition, repetition, repetition. We've all heard of the short-term brain and long-term brain. Short-term brain is where you're remembering a phone number, and you're just repeating it to yourself while you're dialing it, and then you're done. There's really no emotion to that. If you want something to be put into permanent memory, we have to make connections with it. We have to repeat. We have to add emotion. So you constantly have to retalk, and that's why I was really emphasizing looking at what you should be learning in a lecture before you go to lecture. What are the objectives of a lab before I go to lab? What is the end result of this homework before you're starting the homework? And then while you're in those situations, you can be re-emphasizing those connections. Rule number 6, remember to repeat. Again, related exposure to the information. And we've heard studies over and over again that when effective studying is not the quantity, but the quality, study in half-hour chunks. Don't study 5 hours right before the exam. Start a week, 2 weeks, even more if you can before exams, before big projects, before papers. You need to start getting that memory. It's not going to happen overnight, unfortunately. Osmosis through a textbook does not happen the night before an exam. So repeat to remember, and remember to repeat small chunks of time over a long period of time. That's how our brain works. Rule number 7, we've all heard it, sleep well, think well. Again, we're really emphasizing taking care of yourself, making sure you exercise, making sure you get your right nutrients, and then sleep. Students need more sleep, so trying to get at least 6 hours of sleep a night. Try stress management techniques. If you need a nap, that's great. That's your brain telling you just need to shut down for a little while. Even set your alarm and do a 15-minute nap. That can really help those neural circuits regenerate. And they say that when we are sleeping, when we're dreaming, that's when the most learning takes place. That's when our brain looks at, oh, what did we look at today? What was emotional today? What was important today? And rewiring those neural circuits while we're sleeping. Same thing, rule number 8, stressed brains don't learn the same way. So life happens, we get it, but try really taking care of yourself through mental health. There's a lot of resources on our campus at Spokane Falls Community College, lots of free yoga, free Tai Chi, lots of free mental health resources. And it's really important for our brain. Yeah, it'll affect your performance at work. Oh, that's where I was going. So they say that we live in such a high state of stress, a continual state of stress. So if you look at our ancestors, their biggest stress was, when is my next meal? Oh, run away from a predator, go get some water. But then once you fixed those stressors, you got some water, you got away from a predator, you found your next meal, our brain could relax, our body would relax. We didn't have to stress again until we were hungry, until the next threat. However, we constantly are living in a very threat constant world. We're always wondering about our kids, wondering about the next deadline, bills, food, exercise, pressures, social media, all this like outside pressures that are a constant stress, not on our body necessarily, but in our brain. And that's why our society is so lacking in mental health. We have all these stressors that is not talked about well in society on how to fix, rather than just be the perfect person, do all these things without complaining. So I really recommend taking time for yourself. I know it's better said than done, but take 5 minutes, breathe, take advantage of the resources while you're a student that are free. We have mental health counselors on campus. Recognize that life happens, but you need to take care of you. So you learn the best when we're not stressed. Sorry. Number 9, stimulate more of the senses. So brain connections happen when there are more senses stimulated, like we talked about the emotions, more emotions, more connections, more passion, more reason to learning the thing. And the same thing is if more of the senses are stimulated. So if you're listening to non-lyrical music, that can help in your learning, not in your studying. They say chewing peppermint gum while you're studying, and then chewing peppermint gum if you can during your exam. That stimulates another of your senses. Smells, staying in a nice warm hoodie while you're studying and then taking an exam if you're able. Just kind of feel, touch, smell. Those can all help you make those brain connections in your learning. However, humans, rule number 10, humans are very visually sense-oriented. We humans learn best with diagrams, with visual notes, with highlight, different colors, connections. I always, when I was learning in my notes, I had shortcuts. I didn't write out verbatim what all the words were, but I had shortcuts. So if I had an arrow, that meant a process or led to. I'm trying to think, but just using your own visual notes, arrows, boxes around definitions, or stars next to formulas, whatever can bring your brain to remember, oh yeah, there's a star there. What was the number? Oh yes. And so using symbols, using acronyms, it's your brain, it's your notes. You make sense of what works. Number 11, we talked about every brain is wired different, and male and female brains are also wired different. Men and women process certain emotions differently, and emotions are what we pay attention to. Just male and female brains do it differently. And just take note of that when you're in study sessions. If you ever have to present in front of a group of people, there's no bad or good. Just note that different connections happen in different brains. And then rule number 12, we are powerful and natural explorers. So we kind of lose this somewhere through our education and into higher education, but I really want to bring it back. Question the world, question your own notes, question your instructor, respectively. Question, why does this formula lead to this process? Why does this thought process lead to this? Why does this definition tie to this? Only by you asking and wondering about your information will you add that passion, the emotion, the connections. Ask, and you will be amazed by how better connected you feel to the information. And we learn more by active learning, active questioning. It's okay to ask questions during lecture. Instructors encourage it. It's okay to go ask instructors during office hours. Think of questions while you're studying, or ask your peers, and I'm sure they have the same questions or have a good answer for you. So question, 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 make connections, and think about your brain. So the rest of this PowerPoint, which we have up online also, is kind of long. Again, not a great PowerPoint of learning, but I just want to get a lot of information out to you. And so I'm going to ask you to go through and read it, actively read it, and take what notes help you and kind of think about your own notes. But I wanted to talk a little bit before we go about goal setting. A lot of people, students, professionals, get really overwhelmed. We talked about that continual stress, that continual mental stress we put on ourselves. And when we're studying for class, we're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get to med school? How am I going to get to a PhD program? How am I going to get my job? And they stop focusing on the little tangible things. So this is just an example of a long-term goal of a student wanting to get into medical school. So what do you have to do to get into medical school? You have to take biology class, or you get to take biology classes. And then people get so stressed, like, okay, this is my biology class. I need to get at least an 80% this quarter. But that's such a loose and large goal. It's not going to be a day-to-day task. So instead, let's focus on a day-to-day task. This week, I'm going to review lecture notes every week. I'm going to visualize the outcome. Or, okay, Mondays, I'm going to look at PowerPoints. Tuesdays, I'm going to rewrite notes. Wednesdays, I'm going to make flashcards. Thursdays, I'm going to review it. Friday, I'm going to ask questions. You really need to visualize what you want. That makes that passion, the emotion, but then turn it down into tangible, doable things that you can do on a day basis and kind of control here or there. But do think of that long-term goal. We want you to dream big. Shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you'll land among the stars. So really think about, okay, I'm not doing so well in this class, but what can I do today to help with that? What can I do tomorrow to make connections with my homework? What can I do the next day to make a peer friend in that class? Excuse me. So it takes a lot of self-look. It takes a lot of hard work. It does. STEM is a hard field, but myself, your instructors, people on campus, your classmates, we're all here rooting for you. I know we are. So feel free to look through the rest of this PowerPoint and just different tips on reading through different texts, English texts, science texts. And I want you to go through and kind of read it on your own. Take what you want, don't take what you want. And it's really for you to take that advice. So I hope you got some information from it. I know it's kind of fast, kind of long. As an example of this video, I really like videos because you can pause, you can rewind, and you can take out notes, think in your brain, what should I be getting out of this? What was Janae trying to say? Rewind. So I know a lot of instructors are also putting their lectures online, their PowerPoints online. There's a lot of really great free YouTube resources. So just on YouTube, search photosynthesis, and hopefully there'll be a connection that you can make. So I hope you don't get overwhelmed. Take a deep breath. It's okay. And find something. Just work on one thing every day that works for you in your class. Thanks.